peek behind the curtain of the Softly Training Lab with the Softly Performance podcast. The pinnacle of human performance is out there, and we intend to find it.
Welcome to the next episode of the Softly Performance podcast. It's your host, Coach G. With me today, we got Coach Matt and HMFIC Brent on air. Today, we're talking about something that, happened, I think, a month ago. We just never had the opportunity to talk about it. But we're talking about the Sportsmith Conference that I went to, some of the concepts therein. And right before the record, we were talking about, something that, I don't want to say it enrages me because that sounds very hyperbolic, but one of the presenters...
That definitely enraged you.
Yeah. Okay. So AI usage. Listen, I use AI or machine learning for all kinds of things. There's nothing wrong with that. But if I said I want you, listener, to picture this in your mind. Hey, I developed and designed a presentation using nothing but AI in a very proud way. Okay? I want you to picture in your head what that probably looks like. If it's notebook LLM, and you know what I'm talking about, like it all looks the same. Iterative, cliche, typos, artifacts, hallucinations. So that's kind of what we were just talking about because, Brent was talking about how, and I think this is worth pointing out, there are foundational elements that Softly uses it in its design language. And he was just talking, Brent, why don't you talk about it instead of me talking about it? What have you observed?
The conversation hinges around, so we use AI for a few different things within Softly. One, like coding, we've been able to bring more in-house and have more control over our coding and code base with AI, and AI is able to help us troubleshoot issues in the app. So, people can complain like AI is taking jobs. Well, it's not taking your job if you're good at your job. It is truly becoming a tool, right? So I think the argument is to be made that AI is changing the landscape of many jobs, but it is not replacing competent humans. So meaning, and it's
incompetent human,
or incompetent like us, right? If you're or semi-competent, right?
Yeah.
But if you are, the landscape has changed. So back in the day, we used to be able to put a post up like, "Hey, we're giving away a gun. If you're interested in fitness, enter to win." And we'd have 20,000 people give us their emails to win who were into fitness and guns. And then we have their email and we go, "Hey, man, come check out a training plan. You get 2 weeks free, or 10 days was the original trial offer period that we did." And that worked really well. And then the privacy laws, et cetera, the landscape changed. So now we have to focus more on short form content. And so my point with saying all of that is that the game changes. Like if you were really great at driving a horse and buggy, you could either get a car and be a car driver, you could retire, or you could bitch about the fact that cars were around and horse and buggy wasn't, going to be the thing anymore. And so this seems like another coming of it. Where I think it gets really shitty for a lot of people is when they're using AI poorly. But from what I've seen, the people that are using AI poorly were doing shitty work before anyway. So it's just amplifying what they were doing. When you talk about using AI for building planning docs, I think it's great because you can upload like, "Hey, here's what I want to do. Give me a good format." And then you have kind of like an old school format where you're like, "All right, now I can go through this. I have an iterative process, but I'm going to touch literally every sentence, every word, every letter on this document to make it my own." So what you're talking about is somebody who's like, "Nah, AI is just going to do all of the homework." And that just doesn't work in any way, shape, or form.
And I guess it would be the same reaction that I had they shitty slides that they designed themselves, because it shows a lack of preparation for this experience.
Or they just grab like the Microsoft base slides back in the day. Like that used to drive me bonkers, was when you had an executive or somebody in a high level that was using the like templated Microsoft slides and they didn't change anything. It was like, it's akin now to just using like the GoPro editing app music, where you're like, "Bro, you have the same song on every video. Can we do something else in that medium?" But it's just laziness. People don't want to put in the effort, or they have to do a thing and they don't see the importance, so they mail it home instead of like triaging and go, "Nope, I'm not going to do that thing."
Right.
That's not what this is about. Is this what this episode's about? Is AI usage and human performance?
No, I just got emotional about the presenting.
We can go down that rabbit hole, because I've been told like, "Hey, programming's dead. AI is gonna take over all the programming now."
It's too hard, man. I don't think machine learning is going to. If it does, it'll be a while yet, because there's too many X factors, in my opinion.
There's too many X factors and it requires experience, and AI is never going to have the same experience because so much of what all three of us have experienced in coaching in person, I think a lot of people forget that that's what Softly stemmed out of, and all of our coaches have a shitload of in-person coaching experience before moving to this digital thing. We haven't documented that in its entirety, right? How much of the stuff that we know as truth or a debatable truth, because it's all debatable, is our experience, and we've talked about it, but we've never put it into writing. There's a lot.
I'm going to share an anecdote that I saw on Instagram. So this is not my story.
Yes.
It's actually The Rock. The Rock
in AI generated story.
Yeah. So Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson in the Smashing Machine film is, I haven't seen the movie, but Matt Damon was talking about this. He said that he watched this amazing performance in the scene where the character, and I know it's based on a real person, but he's being confronted in a hospital for his alcoholism or his substance abuse. And he cries in a very specific way. He brings a blanket up to his face. And then the scene in general was also very well done. And from what I understand, what Matt Damon was talking about is Dwayne drew from two experiences that he personally had. His father struggled with alcoholism, and his mother got diagnosed with cancer and had that blanket reaction. You're not going to get that from machine learning, man. Like that came from personal experience. So that was when there's people in Hollywood that are saying, oh, AI is going to replace stuff. I mean, that's completely, how are you going to get that? You can't. So
yeah, I think
coaching,
it can replace some people, right? Like if you needed, and the accounting department always hates to hear it when I say this, but the first thing that AI is replacing is fucking accountants, man. Like,
yeah.
Everybody says, well, marketing's going first. Like, dude, that's the most subjective thing on the planet is marketing.
Yeah.
It is as subjective as it gets. And you have to A/B test the shit out of things and blah, 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 blah. Accounting, they'll argue that's subjective. It's really not subjective, right?
I would want a machine in charge of my numbers.
Fuck yeah. So we've actually had AI helping with our accounting at Softly for probably over a year now, doing a lot of the bookkeeping, et cetera. Like we still are checking it, but it's pretty easy, right? And so even prior to AI, your software, good accounting software, was automatically doing a lot of your bookkeeping. You know, it was, if a Facebook charge is categorized to marketing and media, it was automatically cataloging those. You know, there was a lot that was already happening. So I think, you know, you're going to go from accounting departments being 15, 25, 30 people, 10 people to like a dude, maybe 2 people, things like that. But it's still, even in something like that, in a finance department, you may have somebody that's doing collections, right? So they're calling, you know, accounts receivable and going, hey, you owe us money. I think AI is going to continue to be a really great tool, but even the companies that have leaned on it very heavily to try to offload a workforce, like Ford Motors, they're bringing people back because they're like, shit, it turns out that AI can't do the engineering that you can. Like there's still left brain, right brain things happening. It's not all just, you know, pure math. And I don't know. I think it's interesting seeing it. I'm terrified for, you know, my 401k to see what AI is going to do to the stock market. But
right.
It's been a really cool tool thus far. You know, I am not somebody who thinks that we are all writing the end of digital careers, for lack of a better term, by using AI.
No, I think a lot of it's incalculable. But anyway, that was one tiny piece. Yeah, that's not actually what today's subject is about. The subject, again, is about Sportsmiths and the lectures that stuck in my mind. So
Gee, before we get started, for people who are maybe more from the tactical side of things rather than pure sport S&C, can you just give like a bit of an overview about what Sportsmith is as a concept, and then specifically like what the conference is like versus like a TSAC or a SHOT Show kind of thing?
Sure. Okay, so you've got, like, let's say TSAC and any NSCA event, very much, I would say, more of an academic slant. There are times to network, etc. Sportsmith is a conference or seminar, or rather what I went to. I say Sportsmith is an education company, I should say. And they have these in-person experiences that are going to bring in very high-level practitioners, such as myself or Matt, or people who've got, you just give a smirk for those of you just listening to the audio. But anyway, like pro-level practitioners. So strength coaches for the NBA, Premier level or Premier League soccer, etc. And they'll come in and present. And the reason that was attractive to me is because there's a lot of people who, well, there's a point in your career where it all starts to sound the same. And really, when we talk about physical preparation, strength and conditioning, sleep, nutrition, mass, absolute values or relative strength, like that's pretty much it. So it gets more interesting when you're seeing a very high level practitioner introduced with very difficult or unique constraints, and how do they apply these principles like sleep, etc., to their work.
What makes it most interesting to me, is that there's consequence for those trainers.
What do you mean?
Many of the trainers in the world don't have consequence, meaning I'm training somebody to, I'm a personal trainer in the gym. I'm training somebody to be a bodybuilder or do better at their local fight. There's no fucking consequence. There's zero.
And I think that was also attracting me. You're right, man. Hey, I'm just going to call them out. The place I used to work at, they have people who kind of are insulated from failure.
Yeah.
Especially
when you have a camp, you have 2 weeks. The fuck you done in 2 weeks?
Exactly. What if I train them for 2 weeks and they get hurt in week 3 when they're not even with me? Is that my fault? No, I can make the argument it's not. So that's, you're absolutely right. These people that's what I meant by skin in the game. If they fuck up, they fuck up. They're going to pay a consequence.
I think the other thing with something like that, sorry, G, to cut you off, is so we're comparing it, I guess, to NSCA events. And one of the things that the NSCA does really well as an umbrella organization is they get people who this is week 1, day 1 of your career in personal training, strength and conditioning, and they span right the way through. But obviously that means you're going to have to start with learning the alphabet today. This is A, this is B, this is C. Whereas something like Sportsmith, there's kind of prior knowledge assumed. So you can then kind of skip all the way to
right.
Okay, well, today we're working on full prose and paragraphs and things like that. So it allows you to, I guess, kind of bookend a little bit tighter. Okay, this is kind of the scope of what we're going to talk about. So we can spend the entire time having these conversations rather than setting the scene.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. For a higher level.
We call that a barrier to entry. There's a barrier to entry there that allows you to elevate what's being taught. So, at Softly, we have a pretty high barrier to entry to be a customer. If you can't do a power clean or a bench press, we don't fucking have anything for you. Sorry. On to other things. But what it does is it allows you to elevate the baseline, right? When you have that barrier to entry, you're like, hey, everybody here has coached at a very high level. Some stuff that your local physical trainer, personal trainer may debate, we're not even going to debate it here, right? It's almost become irrelevant at that level.
That's a great wider, let's say, area to have a conversation. There's organizations out there, and I'm not saying they have bad courses at all, but Brent, you mentioned no consequence. I'm not going to name names, but they all essentially have 3 letters or they all have the letter F in them at some point. And there's nothing wrong with those courses. It's just this is something that I would get in arguments with one of my former coworkers with, where, okay, cool, you sent me some Instagram reel, it looks sexy. Does the athlete win? If the thing you're doing doesn't help them win, is it working? Because, if you show me some goofy ass exercise, does it help them win? And if the answer is I'm not sure, then it's a no for me, dog. So.
Yeah. Well, and in sport, you're typically, especially when you're training anybody at a very high level, they're already meeting the minimum criteria to be there, right? So if they're already meeting the minimum physical requirement, it's a question to them or their coach or their co-workers of hey, where's this guy falling short, right? And in a broad spectrum, let's say for a tactical athlete, a dude may come to you and he's like, dude, I am not strong enough. I've been running ultra marathons. I've been doing A, B, and C, but we had to move a 400-pound dude and I couldn't grab his feet. So I had to call somebody else, right? And they had to grab it. And that should be an inflection point for you to go, maybe I should be able to lift up, my end of a 400-pound man and move them if that is required in your profession. When you're looking at the gen pop, you don't have that. There's no baseline what happens is you're starting to try to elevate general physical preparedness. And I see that bleed into high level practitioners a ton. So if you have a guy who's on an operational, special operations team at a high level, and you have a new dude come in who's super into Olympic weightlifting, and he's like, you can't even snatch 135? We got to work on your snatch. Hey, bro, this dude's in a tier 1 organization. They don't do fucking snatches for a living, at least not with a barbell. They might with humans, but they're not snatching barbells overhead for a living. So if he's already meeting the baselines, what are the things that are actually going to help him in his in his career that either he or his teammates or his leadership have addressed as a stopgap. And I think in professional sport, you won't see, and frankly at units, you won't see those guys last very long. Whereas when it is a low consequence environment for the coach, you'll see those guys stick around a long time, right? And a lot of times they come up with crazy ass bullshit baselines. Like, you should all be able to squat 2.5x your body weight. Well, says fucking who? Like, is that a great goal? Yeah. Is that an actual standard? Not at a single unit in the world, right? In our world. So maybe it's a personal standard, right? But now, says who? Like, if that dude is shit hot and meeting all the physical hard gates and not a liability on an operation, why do we care about his back squat, right? And so when you look at something like, Sportsmith, those are all people that deal with like real issues that a actual athlete is coming back and being like, hey man, every time I have to cut hard to my left or off of my left or whatever it is, I get a shooting pain, from my ankle up to my rib cage on the left side. What is that, right? And you're like, okay, well, now we got to figure out what's going on.
Yeah. Here's a good notion too. The pro level practitioner may not care about that.
Yeah, they may not.
Pain. Yeah, because it's working. And high level sport, most of them are busted.
Dude, I have a great story. I'll give a shout out to my buddy John Wellborn, who runs Power Athlete. And when I broke my left tib fib, I broke it on 4th of July, 2016. I was set to deploy in September of 2016. And I called him because I knew he'd broken his ankle before, and I had torn cartilage and a torn ligament in my ankle as well. And I called him and I'm like, hey man, I got to heal fast as fuck. This is over 10 years ago now. I got to go on this deployment. You got any tips? And he goes, yeah, heal as best you can and go on the fucking deployment. And I was like, all right. He's like, you got to go to work. You go to work, dude. I'm like, all right. Well, there was like zero recovery tips, right? So I, went down all the rabbit holes that you can go down on recovery, but it was a good thought process, I think, and a good experience for me in what we're talking about, where it's like, we had a whole episode on this of, does it matter, right? At that level, I had a deployment and I was frankly critical personnel on that deployment. It was a very real deployment. I'm going, even if I was in a fucking space boot, I was going on that deployment. So to your point, G, that guy that's like, hey, you're cutting left and that hurts. I don't know if we're going to change that. That might just fucking hurt for you for the next 4 years that you're in this career. I think that that is a critical difference though with sport versus tactical, is the length of time that you're expected to.
Yes, I've talked about that before. Average NFL career lifespan is 3.5 to 5.5 years. Doesn't happen with military first responders. You stick around.
When would that matter or not matter to you as a coach coaching, let's say, professional athletes and then tactical athletes?
Well, tactical athletes, there is no choice, so to speak. There are bigger decisions at play as far as why they're doing what they're doing. There's plenty of times working with pro sport athletes where they're thinking of it as more as a, how can I make it another season? Not how can I live a more fulfilling life, if that makes sense. And I think part of that could be, and I'm just, maybe we should probably have a pro athlete on as a guest. Part of that could be is they're making so much money that a lot of these problems that they have are not going to be problems that someone who's been in the military for 15 years is going to have. Whereas, because they just have so much more resources. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. It's just that for me, if I think about this all the time, especially doing what we do, where it's like, man, what would it be like if I was in for 12, 15 years and I'm taking care of my family and I'm thinking about the divorce rate and I'm thinking about deployments and going to the field and I'm thinking about all these things where my family is a much bigger part of the equation than I feel like with a pro athlete, because it's kind of normalized. Plus, I talked to Keegan, shout out to him, one of the coaches for the Suns. He's got a very rough deployment cycle where he's working 6-7 days out of the week. And there will be days, he told me, which sounds so familiar, but it's very different. It's interesting. I guess what I'm saying is the time away is similar to military. It's just how it's structured is different. Where he'll be coming in at 6 a.m. and his wife is leaving for work. And then he's got to be gone later that day. And then that's just how it is for 3/4 of the year when he's not in season or whatever. Anyway, I bring that up because the problems that pro sport athletes are dealing with are the word kinetic comes to mind. How can I make my body last? Whereas when I'm working with the tactical athlete, I'm thinking, okay, how can I make your body last so that your brain is in a better position?
Mm. What's interesting to me too is I think in a holistic manner, a high level tactical athlete is on a level with a high level pro sports athlete. I think it's very similar in the
mindset wise, yeah.
Mindset wise, and the physical requirements of the job and the stress that puts on the body. Where it differs, hear me out, let me finish, because you're probably going, what the fuck? There's no way. Where it differs is that on a professional athlete, it's typically a much more narrow scope. And so you get more.
I think that's what I was dancing around. Yeah.
Yeah. So you get is more extremes in need for a professional athlete at an acute level. Meaning, we have to sprint on the battlefield, right? I don't think anybody's going to argue and say, no, you don't want a good sprint and full kit in your repertoire. How fast we're going to go, it doesn't touch on somebody who is playing football, right?
Dude, I love that you brought that up.
Sprinting.
Because, I'm glad you brought that up. So I'm going to lose this thought if I don't
go ahead.
say it.
Yeah.
So with tactical guys, when I would work with them, as you pointed out, like I don't have them forever, right? They're coming to me. It's like a camp almost. I'm not so concerned with flying 10s, flying 20s, 40-yard dash, amplitude as far as force plates, etc. Like if I'm using a force plate or if I'm measuring things, it's because I'm looking for the qualitative aspects of it. So like, what about your 40-yard dash? Are you slow in the start? Because that tells me you need to work on starting strength. Or are you good at speed endurance? Okay, good. Then that's covered. Not, oh, well, all of your peers right now are they're flying 10 times are 1.5. That's crazy, but 2 seconds, 2 seconds. Like I'm more concerned with absolute quantitatives with professional sport athletes than I am with tactical athletes. There's definitely way more of a qualitative slant with the tactical athlete. And I think a lot of that has to do with they're kind of, I don't want to say breaking rules. It's just there's so many X factors that are introduced with the tactical athlete that the numbers aren't as important. Strength by itself or speed by itself is not the most.
Yeah.
Or endurance.
Yeah, any of those things are when you look at the actual metric of it, they are important attributes, but the how far you push that attribute is less important as it is for professional sports athletes. So
I'm really glad you brought that up. Sorry, I'll just finish this thought. I've seen other coaches who are accustomed to working with pro sport take a tactical athlete and get them hurt because they're looking at looking at it too quantitatively instead of. It's because that's what they're used to. But they break. And like I remember there was a guy, I'm not going to say who it was, either on the coach or the athlete side, but this is post Exos departure. And I heard what he was doing with the guy. It was basic bitch shit. It was goblet squat for reps. It wasn't bad. But I remember thinking that tied up with what he's doing, he's going to get hurt. And then like 2 days later, he got hurt. And it's not like rule number 3, don't have a stupid story to tell. When you look at the programming, there's nothing crazy in there. But because he was focused on quants and not qualitative, I think going back to machine learning, that's where experience comes into play. If you fucking told an AI model, hey, try that, like it would have broke the dude too. So it's really interesting. I know, okay, I'm going to put fucking money on this. That guy would not have got hurt under my care. I know it for a fucking, I wouldn't have made the choice. Yeah, that's a big fucking
I had a different experience with you at Exos because you and Keegan always gave me to the fucking interns. Like, Brent knows what he's doing enough that he won't let him do dumb shit. And I'm like, hey, I'm going to let this guy do dumb shit.
I always watch from the sidelines, man. I was the E6 and above off to the side. E3's got to learn at some point. All right, Matt, I'm sorry, man. You look like you wanted
no worries. I was just going to throw in a devil's advocate. Like, I completely agree. I think that pro competitive sport is hugely quantitative, and that's one of the big differences. Like, no shit. Like the fact we don't know what's going to happen in tactical. No shit. But I do think that, again, tying back into the machine learning AI side of things, I think that largely that's because we haven't had the ability to measure in tactical like we can measure in pro sport because the parameters are so wide. But I do think as we start kind of developing the ability to measure stuff in tactical, so be that like foot sensors, blast sensors, like integrated kind of stuff in clothing, looking at like sweat ratings and things like that. I think as we get better at that, and then the ability to crunch that data gets better, I absolutely don't think it's going to be the same as sprinting 100 on the track where we know everything down to the step. But I think we're going to get a lot better at like, okay, well, actually, we thought that this is what the limiting factor was for this person in these kind of ops, but actually it turns out that it's like over here. And I think that's one of the really exciting sides of like what the next sort of 5-10 years looks like in our space. To kind of tie this back into what we were talking about at the top.
It's interesting, not to get off track, but it's interesting to me that when I think about society in general. There's so much that society has taken from military and war fighting, like blood clotting technology, etc., like things that save people's lives. But tactical is very much nascent when it comes to human performance by comparison to sport. Usually it's the other way. Usually, society takes from the government as far as resources and learnings, but not so with human performance for some reason.
Yeah, I think human performance, it has gone that way. And it depends in where. So and I think it's by function of true expertise. So if you look at true expertise in things like discipline and mindset, you see that, right? Where it's like, hey, we have a Force Recon guy or Navy SEAL, whatever, and he's going to talk to the Bears, like the fucking biggest sports team, right? He's going to come in and give a mindset class and haze the shit out of you for a day. And I think you see that bleed in because you can definitely make an argument there when it comes to being tough and grinding out really shitty stuff. It's tough to beat special operations, right? When it comes to like, hey, we're going to push through, we're going to enter the unknown, you're in your third overtime and you really want to quit, blah, 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 blah. It's hard to argue that there's a better community out there to look to for how you cultivate that in personality. And so you've seen that bleed into sport. I think one of the critical differences is that the military has never had one thing that you had to be good at in order to really go down the fucking rabbit hole, which is why for so long you heard things like, well, they're football players that have to run really far and all these other dumb things. And now we're like, no. We need to sprint. We need to do all of these things. It's the degree to which you need to do them that is up for debate. I've been thinking about this a ton with regards to shooting because I'm seeing a lot more guys that were not good shooters, objectively not good shooters, but they had been a Navy SEAL or they had been a SF guy or a MARSOC guy or whatever it is. Most MARSOC guys are a little better at shooting, but they had been in whatever that unit was, objectively not a good shooter. They show up and they shoot their local USPSA, which, by the way, is a bunch of fucking nerds. Like, it's like going to an anime convention, but it's guns. And I've done it for a long time. It's fun. I love it. But it ain't fucking cool, right? And it's not what you think of when you're like, badass soft operator. You're not picturing the average guy at your local USPSA event. But they're really good shooters. And so where you've seen it kind of permeate is those guys, like soft guys and military guys, are starting to look over and go, okay, well, these are the best guys at shooting pistols, which requires you to, have really fast processing speed, good weapons manipulations, etc. I'm going to go start taking some of what they're doing and bring it back over here to the military space. You see it in PRS. You've seen it. I think it started to take a hold in long range shooting before it came to short distance, like pistol distance shooting, 25 meters and in. What I'm excited for, and I'm not going to derail us into the shooting sports world, but it parallels, is there's now an actual shooting league for AR-15s. Like PCSL has, you could shoot an AR-15 in PCSL, and that hasn't existed en masse before, which I would argue, well, I'm going to argue against myself in a second, but I would argue that when we look at limited availability to train due to time and other constraints and money, 5.56 is fucking expensive. Guys training with their carbine is probably more beneficial than training with their pistol. Like, I've been on multiple operations. I didn't even carry a pistol, right? I've
right.
Going on deployments, the pistol is your backup typically, unless you're in certain jobs. But now you can see guys that can, on their off time, shoot matches with a rifle. Where I'm going to contradict what I just said is if we look at shooting and tactical performance the same way in shooting, the same way that we look at it in human performance or fitness, running, sprinting, lifting, etc. What we are typically trying to do in the gym is increase the attributes that make us athletic, so strength, power, etc. And if we look at it shooting and we're trying to increase the attributes, so eye speed, hand-eye coordination, blah, 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 there's a lot of transferability from pistol to rifle. Now, when you talk about weapons manipulations, the way you hold the gun, etc., it's different. And so I think there is an argument to be made there that if your majority of your training is on the pistol and that's making you process and see visually quicker and be more precise in what you're doing with that, it transfers over very well to the rifle. It doesn't always go the other way. But I think there is also an argument to be made if you're limited in time to train. And this is the argument to why like the Marine Corps went to optics on a rifle for qualification. You have limited time to train. You should probably train with the weapon system that you're going to use the most.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Otherwise, it's just wasting time. Makes sense.
Yeah. I also see in sport versus tactical, there's like in quote unquote tactical, like let's say in military special operations, in pick a unit, if you are doing an endurance event, your endurance event still doesn't knock on the door of the physical capabilities of doing like an ultra marathon, right? Because your endurance event is half-assed. Your 20-kilometer infill or 40-mile hike, you got to do some shit when you get there. So by design, it's not really possible for your event to be like full on. You can't be 100% for your 40-miler. You can't. Right? Because when you get to the end, you got to go fight some fucking idiot or do whatever it is that you're going to do. And, and place a sensor, sit on a hill with binos, whatever it is that you have to do at the end. The other thing is that you can't, in your training, that is an endurance event, but you cannot become a pure endurance athlete because there is still an expectation that you maintain maximal strength, endurance, some size to you, etc. And those are antithetical to endurance training when you talk about hitting like the tippy top pinnacle levels.
Questions. I wonder now, like with all the running that I'm doing and the size that I am, how I will be feeling if I was active duty, like kinetic, like because I would say 4 or 5 years ago, I was really strong. No, longer than that, 8 years ago, really strong, constant pain, fit for short duration stuff.
So, we often talk about like those phases of being a tactical professional and like kind of working through them through your career. Just to, I guess, get some context around this. So if you'd have stayed in, what would your role look like now versus when you were in? Does that kind of make sense?
I'd be in a leadership role, and it wouldn't be. Well, I don't know, Brent. You know more people, over 40 in that sector. Like, what would I be responsible? I feel like I would be a gunny at least, right? Unless I fucked up.
It's on the unit you're in, and it depends when you came in. So I know a lot of guys that were still doing, like, actually going on operations as a shooter well into their 40s and 50s. I know a few that have done it later than that.
Dude, I know,
Not very many, but a few. Yeah.
Yeah, that's who are 60, 70, fucking awesome.
Yeah, I don't think that I can truly think of anybody who is still in their prime and deploying past 55, to where you're like, yeah, that guy can fucking hang. Like, pick anybody on the planet, he can hang. The guy I'm thinking of in particular is also admittedly on every substance he can inject or ingest to stay at, like, he says not peak level, but like at peak levels, he's doing everything he can synthetically to help that. And I'm not knocking him for it. He's very open about it. And I don't see any issue with that.
And there's a difference between pro and military.
Huge difference. You're not seeing anybody in professional sport that is, one, openly allowed to say that they're doing that. But two, do you know of any professional athletes that are 55? Like, no, not fucking one of them. Not one of them, right?
Right.
I mean, are there?
And
I think that's kind of where it's such a tough, when we start having these conversations, it's so tough because it's such a moving target in our world. When you talk about, like, when we compare back to pro sport, just through that comparison, you're making the assumption that they're college age, maybe into their late 20s. And it's not just like the physiological side of being college age, late 20s. It's like, well, what other shit have they got going on? Like, where are they from a family side of things in terms of like stability? And like we were talking about, if you were kind of still in, like, it's now different. I don't know if you were married while you were serving, but you've now got a little one and you've got like a mortgage and bills to pay and thinking about like where you want to be long term and stuff like that. And I think it's such a moving target that you can't use the same rules. Like you can't use the same rules for a pro sports athlete as you can for someone who's not and I hate this term, but like a quote unquote door kicker. Like I can kind of see the crossover. I can kind of see that you can make links. Like Brent was saying, it's clumsy. The football player that like can sprint and also do an ultra, I can kind of see that if I squint a little bit, but you can't continue to make those comparisons when that person's in a leadership role, when that person's like no longer in those kinetic positions. I still think human performance has to support that. We have to recognize that is a different category of athlete.
I'm glad you brought that up, man, because you have me thinking, and this is a good subject for another time, but how I was training, like, let's say if I was young, if I was like 15 years younger and I wanted to go in the military, what I would be thinking of, what I was trying to do 15 years ago versus now, if I wanted to go back in, the thoughts there. Because if I wanted to go back in now, it wouldn't be about, okay, I need to be the fastest, the strongest. It's like, okay, how do I not get broken? Which is very different than, okay, I want to be able to run 40 miles, 4 miles an hour, no problem. It's like, for me, it's like, okay, I got to make sure that I avoid tendinopathy, etc. Like, how do I do that? So that's really interesting. But hey, we still have to talk about the fucking conference. There were like 3 or 4 presenters. There was a number of presenters that presented, but I have to be honest, and we kind of alluded to this earlier, there's certain practitioners or certain subjects where it's kind of like my eyes are going to start glazing over because they're not saying, it's not that I'm going to learn something new. I'm not doing that. It's just, I'm going to think about the stuff that is new to me when I'm watching your talk that is not new, if that makes sense. So there's certain practitioners that stuck out. So Alex Natera, who we talked about before, all his stuff on, he presented on isometrics and he also presented on power repeatability. Nick Rantham, and he was the last talk that I saw, and his was fucking awesome. Vernon Griffith, friend of the cast, friend of Softfleet, and he's a friend, right?
I don't know.
Not Billy wasn't, but
Hannah Graff, who's a practitioner for the Pittsburgh Pirates. But anyway, and Matt Van Dyke. So let's start with Matt Van Dyke. He's a coach for the Houston Texans. Real quick, what he presented on was something called oscillatory training. If you're familiar with a gentleman by the name of Cal Dietz, he's a disciple.
If you're
of
not,
Cal
you
Dietz.
should.
Yeah, triphasic training. Essentially, oscillatory
Matt
training.
is his number one fan, by the way.
Yeah.
Matt, are you familiar with oscillatory training? Are you familiar with oscillatory training?
Yeah. But through Cal rather than through Matt Van Dyke, though. But sorry, I'll shut up.
Well, Matt Van Dyke was presenting Cal's stuff, essentially.
Yeah, I think he worked with him, didn't he, before in Minnesota? Maybe he's like an intern or something originally.
Yes, I believe you're right. Yeah. Can you talk about what is that? I'm happy to, but I want to give you Well, what I was going to say, why don't you say what you're going to say, and then I will give my interpretation, because I don't want to like preload what you're going to say.
Well, it'll be super interesting, because I've not learned it through Matt. So this is a prime example, if people are listening, where you see that a lot in S&C, and I'm assuming in other walks of life, where it's kind of the same content, but because it's been viewed through a different perspective, like you kind of see different sides of things. Yeah, so oscillatory training is something that you'll see in, I can't think of the name of the cycle off the top of my head, but we've used it a bit within Softfleet programming. It would definitely be something that is going to be more of a quote unquote advanced technique. And that's not to like make it sound super sexy and super cool. It's that you won't get that much out of it unless you've got like a decent level of training. So essentially what you're trying to do is you're working on that relaxation speed. Generally within performance, all we think about is kind of how fast you can concentrically contract, how fast can you shorten that muscle. But based on a lot of the early research, like on Eastern Bloc Russian research, a big factor of performance in sprinting, throwing, which obviously transfers to like most invasion sports, so team sports, is how quickly you can relax a muscle. And the ability to do that increases cycle speed, so you can sprint faster, throw harder, and etc. So oscillatory isometrics is this idea that you're trying to train the nervous system to create really high levels of tension really, really quickly, which is what we're kind of, no shit, like that. We're familiar with that from other training techniques. But then can you let go of that tension really, really quickly and then regain it? So a classic would be things like drop catching light weights, or doing things involving like bands where you're using the band to kind of get like a compensatory acceleration effect. Sorry, I'm kind of demonstrating off camera like something from Team America. And then can you then use that rebound as an additional stimulus to then slow down and hit that relaxation? Clear as mud.
Okay.
Sorry, G.
Okay. So I'll give you an example. So the way I interpreted this, something called reflexive eccentrics. So essentially, if you were doing an incline bench press, because I'm looking at my incline bench right now, you're coming down with your weight, let's say anywhere between 60 and 85% of your 1RM. You're going to bring it down. You're going to go back up as fast as you can. But instead of going even halfway up, you're only going up a quarter, and then you're ripping it back down. And you're going to do that for time. So anywhere from 5 to 10 seconds. So what Van Dyke was talking about is using this. And again, I'm like kind of paraphrasing what he was saying. The way I interpreted it was tissue tolerance. He was talking about it, Matt, alluding to what you were just talking about, coordination and taking advantage of reciprocal inhibition. Why is this important? Well, you can imagine for some of you, you just kind of walk around kind of tight, stiff. That's great for power generation, may not be great for resiliency or long-term. Again, thinking older age, stiffness is good for power until it's not. So it's kind of helping unlock chains, so to speak, make you less stiff. But at the same time, you do have stiffness because you have this on-off switch. If you try this method, to echo what Matt was saying, it's definitely for advanced, because I would say like if you're weak as piss and you're doing this, you're not going to get much out of it. You do need a good solid base. And it's also one of the later things that you may need to work on. And I say may because it's also we going back to what we opened with. Does this help you win? So the thing I liked about it is it's going to, you can structure exercises, let's say your weak areas where your muscles are lengthened and in a compromised position, you can expose them to higher degrees of force and force absorption versus let's just do a normal rep. So that's what I thought was interesting. It goes back to also, Brent, to kind of back up what you were saying earlier, does it help them win? Is there literature to support it? And it's kind of, I can't remember the word, but it's kind of dancing around. The concepts in itself make sense, but do we have enough quantitative data to actually back up, okay, it's helping the athlete sprint this much faster? And I think that's where there's some questions. I do think there's value in tissue tolerance though, because if you're an athlete, let's say you're a lineman, and I'm just using that as an example because I think a lot of Americans will understand, you're pushing up against something, you want that tissue to be exposed to this really ballistic, randomized force. That's a great way in the weight room. That's a great way to expose it without, hey, let's go practice hitting each other in the field. Like that is important. You do need to do that. But if you do that too much, how did you get hurt? Oh, we were punching each other in the face. That was Van Dyke stuff. Brent, what do you think of that? I'm curious of your thoughts.
Yeah, so I Googled it just because I was like, all right, what are we talking about here? Oscillatory training explained. What I am seeing on here is that you're talking about a lower range of motion typically and a lower working weight. So what we're trying to do, like Matt said, is go fast and then go back to relaxed or go slow immediately, and being able to change speed and change direction. So from the standpoint, well, one, story time. I know you guys love my stories. When I first became a certified personal trainer in Southern California in 2010, one of the first guys that I took a course from, I don't remember the guy's name or what the course was, frankly, but I remember he had a notebook full of photos of the top athletes in the world. Usain Bolt was the one that stood out to me. And every athlete in it, he had NBA players, NFL players, sprinters, power lifters. Every single athlete that he had a photo of was in a very relaxed state. So they were like almost bad posture. They weren't posing. There was no strain or tension in their body. And his theory was that your ability to go into that relaxed state when you are not turned on was hugely beneficial and impactful to your ability to recover and perform. So obviously you don't want to be in that fully relaxed state at all times, but I've always thought that the practitioner who can turn it up and then turn it down immediately and very quickly, that's a great skill to have in your repertoire, no matter what, whether that's tactical, pro sport, etc. When it comes time for tissue tolerance, I like having a big bag of tricks, and the reason is that we're generally as coaches always trending in similar directions with what we're trying to expose the athlete to. So if you're talking about exposing the athlete to generating force quickly in small amounts, or just generating force quickly in general, and then also taking that force quickly, like you said, you can't always just sit there and smash each other in the head if you're, talking about football players. But also you can't always work a barbell for a maximal lift on picket or even a max speed or even a max range of motion. So personally, lately, I've been benching more, and I typically have done a very narrow grip. I'm 6'2", and I'm still like inside the knurling on my bench most of the time, and I've been getting horrible tendonitis lately. And I think that I've been...
Whereabouts?
In the elbow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So... my shoulders are fine. And that's usually where guys are fucked up benching is shoulders, right? And so for me personally, I've been changing my range of motion and how wide I'm going in my bench press. So I'm still doing the thing, but now I'm limiting range of motion and I'm limiting the stimulus because, it's a different grip on the barbell. And so I think where that translates is oscillatory training and exploring that in the sense of, is that going to be, in my opinion, the game changer that takes you from a 225 bench to a 315 bench? Probably not, but is it a good tool in your toolbox when we're talking about actually generating force and pick the movement, pushing, pulling, etc.? It's probably a great tool in the toolbox. I'm curious when we talk about what I saw in my quick glancing as you guys started talking about it was a very broad range of like 20 to 60% of your working max. That's a really broad range. I would like to dial that in more because like when we were talking about the failure rate, a 20% failure rate being optimal for learning, growth, etc. I think there's got to be an optimal weight there for that type of training to get what you want. Go, Matt.
Sorry, Brad, I don't want to cut you off. I think classically it's so wide because there's a couple of different main buckets of applications. Sorry, G, I know I'm kind of stepping all over your toes. You can either prescribe it like the example that G was saying when you're in like a weaker or a biomechanically less advantageous position, so like the bottom of that bench. In which case you probably want it to be slightly lighter, but equally you can also, if you're thinking, it's easier to explain if you're thinking kind of traditional pro sport, like kind of periodization, you can apply it in positions where you're very strong, like where you're kind of in an advantageous position, as in like the muscles are at like a quote unquote optimal length, like the cross bridges. And that's then going to be more of like a peaking type stimulus as opposed to a injury prevention. I know that's not what that is, but as opposed to that kind of application. So I think that's why it can be quite wide.
So, I actually forgot to mention a different parameter. So I have written here as qualities to train, speed is at 25 to 55%. At least that's what Van Dyke is doing. Yeah. And then strength is 85 to 90% of their one around. Brent, can you
that sounds really high.
Mine? Oh, the intensity. Can you turn your gain down?
Is that better?
Keep talking.
I just need to back up from the microphone.
That's good.
While you guys are figuring that out really quick, I don't know, you can cut this. I don't know if you want to play, obviously we aren't PTs or anything like that, so we don't want to get into hot water. Do you want to play Fix Brent? So we can
Yeah, that's the other thing. Thank you, Matt. Brent, two things. Are you doing neutral grip dumbbell bench? And then secondly, when's the last time you did an underhand bench press with the barbell?
I am doing neutral grip dumbbell bench, and that also is not phenomenal. Because again, it's an elbow issue, not a shoulder issue, right? So I think it's getting
attached to your shoulder. So
what's that?
Your elbow's attached to your shoulder. So
no, but I think it's actually the acute angle under load is what is causing more issue than anything. Is that really acute angle? So when I go wider, it's not as much of an issue.
Less range of motion required. Yeah.
Less range of motion. Yeah. I'll play with underhand. I used to do underhand a wee bit. Haven't done it in quite a while. Matt, do we have underhand prescribed in any of our training plans?
A weird one.
I think it's in the library, so it probably was at some point. Yeah, probably like some of the earlier stuff, I would think.
I've been on Matt's later plans as of recently.
Yeah.
And
it's a weirder one.
I'll get you.
So I was going to say, reason for that is going to encourage more external rotation in the upper quarter and more thoracic extension. So essentially, giving you more space. Not to say that overhand is bad. I think everybody knows at this point, like through the podcast, like we're not saying any exercise is bad. It's just if we can give you space. And my head goes to capacity. Perhaps we're just asking a lot for that tendon. But Matt, what are your thoughts?
Well, apologies. I don't mean to be super patronizing. I appreciate that you are a coach as well. But like, are you doing anything specifically for the tendon? Like for tendon health? Yeah. Okay.
I forget about it the second I walk away from the bench. It's actually only bench that it's bothering me too.
Okay.
So it's not bothering me in other places. I also have had a partial avulsion tear on a bicep years ago. Shout out to Jeff for doing that to me as my last team commander on active duty. It's bench pressing. I've re-strained that a couple times. I have strained it again a couple times since it happened. And so I'm always pretty cognizant. It's tough for me to start going to like real bench press numbers to me. Like if I start bumping into the high twos, like when I start trying to bench 315 plus again, thinking that like I'm going to cross that threshold again, that's when I run into issues with that partial avulsion tear, coming back continually. So I frankly I'm putting a baby weight on the bench anyway. So I was doing a lot of reps, and again I think that acute angle. I'm 6'2" and I have a long wingspan. So I think when I was going tight so often, so much to try to save the shoulders is where I started to run into that issue.
Have you ever used a multi-grip bar?
I have. I just don't have one.
Yeah, same. The Leico one. I am looking at that one. Are we sending Nolan to home Gym Con?
I would like to. I need to make sure that we can send him.
Yeah.
But I'd like to send Nolan to that. I think I have a conflicting deal then. Yeah, I want to get a neutral grip bar, and then I have a like bootleg GHD that I've built where I'm using the arm that comes out for belt squats, and I have a bench position so that I can get feet underneath that, and it's all right for like a bootleg GHD. I can't be quite as explosive as you would in a real GHD. A safety squat bar is probably on my list before a neutral grip.
I use that more than anything nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Same. It's a great bar. Matt, I feel like you were going to say something.
I think it's probably worth, so if we kind of consider we have like 5 minutes left, I don't want to like go into this too deep. I think it's worth definitely listening to what you were saying and see if you can kind of reduce some of the angriness of the tendon by working around it temporarily, but clearly you probably want to bench again in the future. So I think it's also worth, if you can, simultaneously try and do some tendon health type stuff. If you can do some like super light, even like bottom of push-up hold, like some ISO stuff. So tendons love load, as in like having force put through them, not so keen on what's called jerk. So as in like a spike in force. You might find that because obviously you're so experienced within training that like the bottom of a push-up hold isn't enough load for that tendon. So that can be, you can just easily do that on a flat bench if you prefer. Drop to a kind of a range that still feels comfortable rather than, I'm assuming it gets to a certain depth and it starts to feel gnarly, or is it like a CG?
No, it's a certain depth and then a frequency, not so much weight. So if I'm benching 245, 265, it doesn't bother me if I'm out a little bit wider. It's actually, because I've trained narrow grip for so long, it's easier to bench that narrow grip, but that's where the pain starts.
Yeah, now, the pain's medial inside of your elbow?
Yep. Yeah. And so that's why like a neutral grip with a dumbbell, it doesn't really help because that's still, it's that acute angle of the elbow that's inducing it. So what's weird to me is that it doesn't go up or down given load in the way that you would think it does. It more goes up and down when it's just tension at that acute angle. Meaning if I'm doing push-ups, which are, no weight of, just a body weight movement, but going narrow grip into that acute angle, then we have issues.
That kind of that fits. You see that quite a lot. There's like neuro tags associated with like certain range of motions.
Yeah, so it's also like with all of the injuries that I've had, like, so that elbow backstory in 2019, I was deployed and we had an ultrasound and my medic would ultrasound that elbow twice a day because I had such bad tendonitis in it. I was having a hard time shooting pistols. It was so like, I couldn't grip a rifle with like the pistol grip on a rifle. That hand was just dead, and shooting pistols was like, didn't work out well, but induced that because I was racing dirt bikes and shooting guns a shitload back then. And so just all of that grip work, I think, is how I induced that tendonitis. And it's the same arm, same spot, etc. It's like an old injury creeping in. But if we rewind probably to 10 episodes ago when we talked about like, do the injuries fucking matter or do you just keep going through it? That's kind of was like I'll keep, maybe this goes away by not going into that acute angle. It gets less angry and then I can start to condition the tissue after that, right? I'm a big proponent of like, hey, let's back off. Let's do some other stuff that still is developing the body the way we want. Back off, let it get less angry, less inflamed, and then try to expose the tissue to some stimulus if it ever works again.
You had me thinking on, sorry, Matt, you had me thinking on bicep eccentrics and isos, so like taking a strap and being at a acute angle and then fucking curling it as much as possible, hoping the strap doesn't break so you punch yourself in the face.
Well, so I'm going to play with that because it's my left bicep is the one that I tore. It's my right elbow that has the tendonitis. So if I'm not going nuts on the left bicep and I'm just doing it on the right, we could play with it. See if that.
Yeah, and I'm wondering too, since it attaches at the shoulder, playing around with an incline bench curl. Because it's going to put your shoulder in more extension. So just a thought. Yeah. Be smart.
I try to be. I'm really dumb, but I try to be smart.
So let me just, so we talked about Natera very briefly. I feel like we talked about ISOs before, so I feel like that was kind of, it was just
Matt
more
loves his ISO. That's like, when I think of the shit that Matt's going to work into a training plan, ISOs is probably number
Get ready
one.
to stay very still for the next hour.
He did, this is worth everybody hearing. When I say everybody, I'm talking about listeners too. He did throw up a a quadrant where you have strength on one vector and training experience on the other. And he had a percentages of isometrics applied to that. So if you're low in strength and low in training experience, isometrics should make 25 to 50% of your training level. Let's say level 2, 75 to 99% of your training. Level 3, 0 to 25%, and level 4, 50 to 75%. And then obviously what changes are the intensities and the intent, right? So I thought that was really interesting, but we can table that. Nick Rantham, I mentioned him before. His was essentially about, and we'll talk about this, and I feel like we've danced around this several times, nano dosing, and he said pico dosing, and he kept he had a great sense of humor. Pico dosing isn't a thing, but essentially, where are we going to get in a very time-poor environment, where do we get our doses in? And he would like lie about or fucking play tricks with the head coach, not strength coach, head coach to get an athlete to run a sprint. So what I mean by that is they would be warming up on the pitch on field A, and the coach is paying attention to that, and he will pull an athlete over to field B, which was just out of sight, give him some quick sprints to hit a specific velocity, because in the football world, I'm talking soccer, they have all these metrics tracked. They know how much mileage each athlete needs to get and what peak velocity they have to get. So he would go take that guy through while the coach was distracted with the actual warm-up, which was fucking great. What a great presentation. Hanegraaff talked about dynamical systems theory, which we were talking about we've talked about that on this episode. Everything that I saw in that talk, we've talked about on this podcast. So Sportsmith, I would say if you're a listener and you're like, oh, should I go to Sportsmith? I would say that you don't need to, because there was no time to talk to each other about the space between what happens like when you have the academia, what does that look like in the real world? I think the NSCA does a better job of giving you dead time where you can just catch up with people. So I will say the next event I'm probably going to go to is the Altus Summit, one of their next summits, because it feels like, at least from outside looking in, that there's a lot more time for interpretation. And here's the big kicker as far as for the end user, specifically the listener, is there a practical element? Sportsmith, there was zero practical. When I say practical, I don't mean all of us sitting in a room watching two dudes go at it, which sounds really...
I'd pay for that.
But rather, are you participating in the experience? And I feel like, and that's super important, guys. I am definitely... and Brent and Matt both know this, practice what I preach. If we're going to talk about sprint mechanics, I'm going to fucking show you with my body how to sprint. And then I'm going to show you how to do it. And I think there's a lot more value as far as learning versus, hey, here's what we did for power repeatability with our athletes. Like, nah, you need to know what it feels like. So
yeah, people will argue that with you, though.
100%.
You don't need to know what it feels like. Yeah.
Because they're scared.
I read about it one time.
Yeah. So, team, thanks for your patronage, so to speak. And, we're going to wrap it here. Matt, any last words? Final words?
No, nothing for me.
Brent?
Your injuries don't matter.
All right. That's going to do it for us today, listeners. We'll see you on the next one. Die living.